Again, it facilitates economic development. Just like the financial system, it facilitates economic development, because those who are saving, those who are pooling their savings, are finally deploying their money for the purpose of further production, as we saw earlier. This essentially circulates, or this essentially creates lots and lots of employment. People get employed, people again earn, and the income keeps circulating. You have an economy which is characterized by growth in terms of production, growth in terms of employment, growth in terms of avenues that open up. And an interesting part here is, these opportunities that exist need not essentially come from consumption points that exist within the same country. Maybe something which is demanded in some part of Europe, some part of Africa, some part of maybe some other nation in Asia. For them, you can produce here. Or you have models where you do some services for them. The consumption perhaps takes place there. You have employment generated here. You have foreign exchange created here. So on that form, it helps in supporting your economic development. It helps in pooling savings, which we have already seen. And finally, it helps financial economic investment linkage. There is a very strong linkage between finance and economy. And in fact, finance is the intermediary between production and investment. So when you start with production, you are seeing that the production creates further investment opportunities, and that investment opportunities get recycled into new products and services. So the link between finance and economic development is very strong. Just like the link between industry and economy tends to be very strong. So these are some of the key functions of the financial market. Now, when you look at the components of the financial system, something that you can very clearly understand is that much of what the financial system essentially need to do is fundamentally done by the financial market, because it creates a platform for the movement of funds. It creates a platform for anybody, any entity to save, to invest, to transform their ideas into actions, their ideas into taking advantage of opportunities that exist, and thereby keeping the economy vibrant and growth oriented. Now, at this juncture, we need to understand, if these were perhaps the functions of the financial market, that function has to percolate at the micro level into enterprises which are good in terms of their capital structure and their capitalization. Now, when I am talking about capital structure, what we mean is the ratio between debt and equity in the long-term funds. Every institution would have a financial structure and a capital structure. The financial structure talks about the link between long-term funds and short-term funds, the ratio or combination of long-term funds and short-term funds, whereas the capital structure talks about the combination between debt and equity. Now, how meaningful this is? Or we saw that debt is a cheaper source of finance. So why not finance the entire project with debt? Or if institutional finance in the debt component itself is institutional finance is more cheaper than debt financing, why not finance the entire project using institutional finance? The problem here is we need to always keep this ratio intact to ensure that there is an appropriate management of your risk and return profile. There is a proper match between risk and return. This is one key issue on which the opportunity for this blending comes from the financial market. Because if the financial market is very robust, there are debt instruments, there are equity and derivative instruments. So you can raise money, say if you want to raise money by issue of debentures, the debentures ultimately have a market in the debt part of your secondary market. So your primary market for debt, the secondary market for debt has to be live and healthy in order to take advantage of your debt. Similarly, if you want to raise money through institutional finance, you need to have financial institutions which are ready with funds, which have deployable funds. So there again the market is important. Contrary to this, if you want to raise money by equity, you need to have stock exchanges in place. So here we need to see that what is at the micro level a capital structure requirement, what is at the micro level a combination of debt and equity is having a direct linkage with the financial market. If your financial market shows no signs of growth in the debt segment, it is very difficult for you to maintain a high level of debt in your capital structure. So the risk return trade-off at the micro level has a higher level linkage with the financial market. Similarly, the rate at which you capitalize, whether the rate of return justifies the amount of capital that you have employed, is what we call the capitalization rate. If you have a rate of return which does not justify the capital employed, you're undercapitalized, or if you the other way around, you get overcapitalized. So the capitalization rate also at the micro level would depend upon the health of the financial market. So what we are trying to put across here is the capital structure and the capitalization that you have will to a very significant extent be impacted by the financial market which stands at the top, and that is where we need to have a healthy financial market in place. Similarly, your liquidity decision at the micro level. Earlier we were saying short-term funds in the money market. Now, money market has got short-term instruments, we have call money, we have commercial papers, so on and so forth. Your working capital requirement talks about a circulating cycle. Now, a fundamental theory that we need to understand here is your long-term funds are used for procurement of permanent assets under project finance, and the effectiveness of their use is its permanence. Whereas your short-term funds were used to procure your current assets, which includes your inventory, your work in progress, and so on and so forth, your financials in terms of credit that you gave, the debtors that you have on terms of credit sales. Now here the key element is not permanence, but the pace or the speed with which they get converted. So once you start with cash, immediately you need to, if you are a manufacturing firm, you need to convert this into raw material into work in progress, into finished goods. If you are selling on credit, debtors need to come back into cash. The pace with which you do this will determine how your working capital requirement is managed. And if your working capital is well managed, and again if you have a robust financial market in the money market segment which pumps your financial requirements, there is a very strong linkage between micro level working capital management and the financial market which supports the best utilization of your financial resources for the purpose for which it is given. And obviously, as we all know, what could be perhaps the basic requirements, or what would be the basic determinants of how much of working capital that you need. We saw the basic determinants of project finance is at what level you operate, what is your planned capacity, what is your project size, what is your investment horizon, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to working capital, it would essentially mean what is the nature of your industry. If you are in a manufacturing industry, you would require more working capital than you are in a trading firm. If you are manufacturing something like a ship or heavy engineering, you would require more working capital because the conversion time is longer. If you are in manufacturing perhaps a fast moving consumer good or a small level, a petty article, perhaps your working capital requirement will be less. So it depends upon which industry you are. Again, it depends upon the type of product, as we just saw. It depends upon the operating cycle. How long is the operating cycle? The time it takes to start with cash and convert it and get back cash. If the cycle is long, more. If the cycle is short, perhaps you will require less. It requires at the scale of operation that you have. What is your planned capacity and what scale of production you go on with. It again requires with the credit term that you have. If you are not giving credit, perhaps you will require less working capital. If you are giving credit, it requires more capital. But again, this is based on how the industry operates. Because if everybody is giving credit, you will be compelled or forced to give credit, and you cannot be entirely different from the industry. Again, it depends upon your cash management, how effectively you manage cash, what is your production policy, and what is your inventory management system, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the determinants of your working capital requirement. So what we are trying to bring across at the micro level, when we discuss capital structure, when we discuss project finance. So again, when we look at financial market, relate the same to the point from where we started. We started looking at the objectives of finance and the approaches to finance. When we looked at the objective, we were very clear that there were two objectives, profit maximization and wealth maximization. And we saw how wealth maximization is a superior concept because it includes profit as well as all other non-profit parameters of market, quality, management, governance, because all these together collectively reflect upon the market price of the share, and that was the objective of finance. Again, in the approaches, we saw that our original concern or our conventional and traditional concern was on just raising money. So if you look at the financial market at that point of time, the fundamental responsibility or the basic obligation of the financial market was to make funds readily available at the point when it is needed, because raising was the concern. The medieval concept gave equal emphasis to raising as well as using, and the modern concept says, do you have a viable project? Do you have a workable idea? Are you sure of a good opportunity that is going to be useful? Funds are here. So here, finance is wise application of funds. And today's financial market is a market which says, here are the funds, what are you going to do? And that is what we are trying to again link with in terms of financial management. If this is the kind of financial market that you have, the obligation with the investor, the obligation with the entrepreneur, the obligation with the person who runs the enterprise is basically to do good financial planning. And when you are talking about this financial planning, we are saying that the market have players, the market have entities, the market has savers who have expectations, and they are ready to give you money if you are going to use it well. So you need to plan your resources, you need to plan your financial requirements for funds on a long term and short term basis, and again you are looking at the applications of these funds in the most appropriate form or in the most beneficial form that prevails. Now, coming back to the first component of the financial market, when we are talking about the money market, what is the shift that has taken place in the financial market? Banks at one point of time were in the private sector. 1969 and 80 saw nationalization. Subsequently, there was a huge infusion of technology. We started going for all kinds of online services. We started with co-banking, electronic movement of funds. We went on into RTGS. Time and space limitations were broken. Then we talked about internet banking. Today we are talking about banking using a smartphone and all kinds of mobile applications. So swift is the movement of funds, and all banks have started going into the online deployment. Now with this, there has been heavy investment on technology, heavy investment on servers, heavy investment on the systems which support swift movement of funds, perhaps not just across the country, but even across the globe. But here there is a challenge. The basic challenge here is, if you are moving into that mode, you need a huge clientele. you need a huge base of customers. And if you need that customer, because you have invested on servers, you have invested on technology. So if you want to take advantage of that, you need customers everywhere. You need customers across the country, you need customers across the globe. And that has posed a new challenge to banks. And today we are in a phase of consolidation. We already saw how the subsidiaries of SBI have merged, how other nationalized banks are thinking of mergers to take advantage of the synergy that could result from consolidated operations. What are some of the changes which take place over there, or which are taking place over there as far as the money market institution of banks are concerned? The first and foremost change is, earlier our concept, maybe 20-30 years back, we learn about banking as banks are intermediaries. Those who save will put the money into the bank. Those who invest in the industry will take money from the bank. So banks are intermediaries between savers and investors, but slowly they are moving into a phase of disintermediation. Industry is directly moving into the savers. That is the whole issue of IPOs, that is the whole issue of the secondary market. Those who need huge funds need not essentially approach banks, they can directly go to the savers and get money. So from intermediation, perhaps disintermediation is taking place. It has positive as well as negative implications, but this is one change which has taken place. Another change is cross-marketing, which we saw earlier in financial market subsegments. Banks themselves have started cross-marketing. Banks will do insurance business. Banks will market some mutual funds. Banks will engage in support services of perhaps doing money transfer. Banks will also perhaps do business by just enhancing their profit margin through investing in real estate or investing in the secondary market, because the competition that exists between banks have come to stay, as the spread today is relatively minimal. So if you need income, you look at all possible ways of marketing related products, allied products, doing related services, portfolio management services, allied services, customer support services. You do all those financial counseling and try to keep your clientele with a huge base. So cross-marketing is going to be a key issue which stands over there. Again, there is a shift from industrial finance to retail finance, because as I said, for huge project funds, today the industry does not significantly depend on banks. They take the IPO route, or they might take the secondary market operation or the debt market, primary market segment using debt. So options are numerous. So what happened? Banks had to concentrate on retail finance, be it housing, personal loan, all those options became very ripe. Earlier concept was postponement of credit. Now it is preponement of credit. Now what this is talking about is, you save some money and then take a loan to supplement your savings and purchase a product. I save something for my home, then I supplement it with a housing loan, and then I buy a house. Today the concept is, you first buy a house and you save to repay the loan. You don't save money to buy a car and then supplement it with a car loan and then purchase a car, but you purchase a car first and use your savings to repay the loan. So you're preponing. There is no postponement of consumption. You're preponing the use of your credit. So the idea is, credit is not a bad word. You start with all kinds of buying, because the emphasis moving on to the retail credit that you have. This is what is going to happen, or this is what is going to be the center stage of banking in the future. So this is a paradigm movement that takes place. That means banking, not just talking about banking. There are banks which also talk about a lot of other related customer services. You want to pick up a guest from an airport, or you want housing for somebody, or you want a patient to be taken to a hospital. You can even inform your bank. For all these kinds of non-financial services also, they will support by having extended value chains for those services, and they'll take the money from your bank account, for which you will have a privileged customer status and so on and so forth. So this is what has happened as far as banks are concerned. Now, when you look at the depository services that are happening, now what do you mean by a depository? Where something is deposited. So we have two depositories which are what you call attached or attributed to two of our stock exchanges. We have NSDL for the National Stock Exchange and CDSL for the Mumbai Stock Exchange. The depositories are a place where all your demat accounts are electronically put in perspective. So what happens is the trading in the secondary market today is by and large in a demat form, and your equities which are traded there, it has a very quick market. You can buy today, sell today, buy today, sell tomorrow, and you have your ensured of liquidity or ensured of transparency in your dealings. This happens in your other segments, and you have the same depositories also supporting trades in its derivative forms also, like futures, options, in which you can have your trade. So in this course on your financial market, we have a quick look at these options in terms of a developed market and how they are going to support your investment environment, your deployment environment that exists for the economy. Then you have lots of products which are coming up over there, the innovative products which are coming up over there. We already have given some. We are talking about a host of products which come up in the primary market. The fundamental changes, you have the IPO system where the price is primarily driven by bidding from the investors. So you have a price band given, the book bidding offer, and you have an IPO coming up, and that is again supported by a host of services. You have ASBA services, you have merchant bankers, you have lead managers who support it, and you have an IPO that is functioning. And we learn more about that in the subsequent units. Then when the primary market closes, the secondary market comes. It is what we call by and large led by the forces of demand and supply. How if there is more demand, price could go up. If there is more sale, price could come down. So there you have that operating over there. You also have mutual funds. We also have mutual funds existing. You also have the different commodity exchanges. You also have the ETF, exchange traded funds. So a snapshot of this perhaps will be coming out in the units that are to follow on the kind of innovative products which the market has to offer as far as the financial market is concerned. Now, in your financing decisions that you basically take, you have to basically identify or fundamentally identify the sources. We have to look at which is the source which is basically suitable for you. You have to decide in your capital structure where to go in terms of debt and equity. We already saw the relative benefits and the relative challenges which emerge in each of these questions. We have to look at what is so far the internal as well as the external sources, what we can procure from India and what comes from abroad. We can also look at the possibilities of perhaps raising funds through receipts from the American market, through ADRs, or from the European market through GDRs, which are possibilities through which the market does has its own support mechanisms. Now again, how this market shift has happened after some off late changes which have taken place. I just mentioned some of which. One perhaps could be the demonetization that we have looked into of late. And the idea was to see that we create more of emphasis in terms of transparency in the use of resources, whether it comes to purchasing, holding, return, resale, so on and so forth. So this has created some impact in the financial market in terms of having greater emphasis to financial assets rather than physical assets. So one possible offshoot could be the higher demand that went into financial assets when compared to the other assets which were there in the market that were used in a particular form that could be managed well. You also have a number of mutual fund investments and other institutional investment opportunities which came up, which came to be looked up as relatively competitive opportunities which can be taken advantage of. Another huge sector that came up consequent to the change in your financial market and the demonetization step was the MSME segment, the micro, small, medium enterprises, through the MSME Act which came up in 2006, and we started having a separate platform for MSME. Now recently we also have a separate Bharat Cart, which is something similar to what we have in Amazon or in Alibaba, kind of platform for MSMEs. So you're talking about an e-platform for MSME segments. Now when you have an e-platform, that is where we are going to see in your subsequent units how e-commerce relates to financial market. Now when you're talking about e-platform for MSME segment, then they would have opportunities which would require funds, and we are trying to see how the financial market can perhaps respond to that opportunity that exists over there. But then the demonetization has also come up with challenges which we need to look into. While examining our financial market, we need to also look at some of the hard realities of the economy, which might not be very positive in taking advantage of the situation that prevails in a country. The key issue there was, when we are talking about a cashless economy, what is the extent of digitization, what is the extent of use of e-resources that we have in our country was one challenge that we had over there. So how much of digital penetration did we have, considering both urban and rural? What was the urban-rural divide that India had in terms of in terms of your telecom infrastructure? So then you have one segment perhaps not having the same facility to trade, not having the same facility to go through the e-route in the financial market. So urban-rural divide was a key issue. Literacy was a key issue. Both your literacy, in the general literacy in terms of reading and writing, and your financial literacy. There were people who were not literate, and there were people who were literate but did not have the same level of financial literacy to trade in the financial market. So that was a basic issue. And also supportive infrastructure, like if you have villages which do not have power, you cannot think of telecom. Villages which did not have roads, did not have connectivity, which did not have drinking water. So that does affect your financial environment that supports growth for a particular segment. So here, just to conclude on the path of the first part of financial market, what we are trying to see is, we are trying to see that when you have a good financial market with all its segments in the money market as well as in the capital market, again in both the primary as well as in the secondary market, which are very well developed, which has got numerous opportunities for investment, which has got innovative products for deployment, then you have a very robust and good organized, well-regulated systems in place. You have lots of people who know where to park their funds that they have saved and how to utilize it for the development of the country. Now, this ensures that if you have a very robust financial market looking at all segments, it ensures that we are not just looking at islands of growth. We are looking at growth at a level which is massified, which has to come for all. We are looking at a system in place, which we call the financial system in place, which is supporting economic development, which is supporting sustainable development for all in the segment. So there is some room, there is some scope for everyone in this segment to see that they have an opportunity to save, they have an opportunity to get a reasonable return, and they have an opportunity to develop fund. Now this gets linked with the emerging business models. This emerging business model need not essentially mean that we are looking at having holistic organizations where we have all resources, we have money, we have men, we have materials, we have talent, we have management, and we start everything in a value chain. We procure, we manufacture, we service, we deliver, we market. Now those models are fast changing with the breaking up of the limitations of time and space. We are coming to models where every enterprise, every organization, every entrepreneur for that matter, or every person who looks at innovation or commercial takeoff perhaps sees something in which they are best suited. So you have entities which basically does only assembling, or entities which does just agency service, entities which does franchising, entities which does e-trading alone, entities which are engaged in delivery, and you can concentrate on something which is the most suitable for you. There is a business model for you. So you can have a model, you can have a model, or you can have the model in which you do, which is something which is best suited for you. So if I find that there is a need for a product or a service somewhere in some part of the country or even abroad, what I do is I do not do everything that is necessary to manufacture that product or to deliver that service. I can use the support of different agencies. If I have a financial model with me, I can use financial services of ancillary agencies. If I have a manufacturing model with me, perhaps I can use assembling support from somebody else. I can use servicing support from somebody else. So the idea here is an emerging business opportunity always exists when we always try to anchor upon something which is best suited for us. So I can do that perhaps just by bringing people together who supply services and then delivering that service to the end user. So for this, the resource that links up into this is essentially finance, and the financial market as well as emerging business model talks about that linkage. Now to conclude with this, the next part of the unit, we will try and see what perhaps are the best emerging business models and how technology supported services with financial market supported again with technology enables and facilitates the delivery of such services. That is what we'll see further in terms of market and business models.